Testing. Okay, that's working. Good. Hi guys. How are you? Hello, hello. Oh, we got the Panzerkampfwagen Tiger aus 2B. Very good name. The old guard. How are you, man? Hello, hello. Yeah, so the purpose of the stream is I want to show off a little card game I made and see if you guys like it or have suggestions. And also just talk about other stuff too. You can ask questions and we can just hang out for a bit as well. Um, and also just see if this little card game thing is worth pursuing because I think it would be fun to make the art for it and stuff. I know a lot of other YouTubers do like plushies, and you might put in $30 to get like a little stuffed animal, but I never really thought that fit with my channel. And so if there's something around the same price as a plushie, but you could collect art that we make custom, and it could be played as a game too, but also collectible for the art, then I think that's maybe more fun. So that's something that I just want to talk about a bit and see if it's something people are interested in, because it kind of serves a dual purpose of being merchandise, but also kind of a game. But I'll also preface it too. I know a lot of people, I think if you say I want to do a trading card game or just like a card game in general, you kind of get the same red flag as, hey, I want to make a free to play mass multiplayer video game. And then people are like, uh-oh. How's that going to be monetized? How's that going to work? How much commitment does a person need? Do they have to grind? I think people maybe feel a similar way with cards, generally, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what your guys' impressions are. I'll probably leave this stream up too, and people can leave comments, and I can leave it public. Just to give you guys an example, these were some concepts that were drawn a while ago. I don't know if this artist would be still collaborating with me because this was done over a year ago. But here are some. Sorry, my voice. I should have got water because I have not spoken today yet. Anyways, yeah, sorry if I end up clearing my throat, but this is just some of the art that was made, and so it would not be. It's not too cartoony, but it's also not like photorealistic. It's hand-drawn custom artwork for like equipment you can assign, different units, different tanks, and that sort of thing. And so again, I think even beyond this idea of it having to be this big game or like you've got to collect it or buy boosters or something, I just think the art is generally nice, and it would be fun to create World War II themed art in our art style and have people like collect the cards for fun. So this is generally the art style for it. Now, what I have here in this prototype are just random placeholder artwork and formatting. And so nothing here is really finished. I'm just trying to get the mechanics down. Mr. Adado, didn't you play a game with your friends with these cards sometime before? Yeah, so I was working on a card game over a year ago. And the original version looked a lot different than this. In fact, I don't even know if I still have a copy saved. But it played similarly to the game called Cards, which is a World War II trading card game that I wasn't even really familiar with at the time. And I just thought the games are too similar, so I kind of gave up. You know, I wanted to make something that felt more unique. Now, this new iteration I think is more unique, and perhaps as well, if I explain the rules, you guys could even play against me in a way, like on the stream. Like I could give you guys a hand and or like a hand of cards, and you could decide what cards you want to play as a collective or just throw out ideas, and we can kind of play through it maybe through a stream. That could be fun if that works. But yeah, I suppose I'll generally give an explanation of the card game, and then you guys can tell me what you think. And then the other thing that I've been unsure of is the monetization. Not in a way of like, how do I make the most amount of money out of this? But in a way where it's like, how should this be sold in sets? Like people have mentioned trading card versus living card game. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that kind of terminology. For me personally, I don't like the experience of buying a box and having 200 cards all in there at once, and there's nothing collectible. Once you have it, you have it. You spend $80 on that. Something doesn't sound as appealing. I do like in trading card games where they say, hey, you have boosters, but you also have just a starter deck that's cheap, and you can just buy a starter set and you're done. So you could put down $20 or $30 or whatever the amount is, and that's all you need to buy, and you could just stay with that. Or if you wanted to collect rarer and unique stuff, you can buy little boosters, and I think it's kind of fun to open those packs. Now, there's like a darker side to that with people reselling or hoarding a bunch of boxes and artificially increasing the price. So I think there's some negativity surrounding the ethics of certain trading card games. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe if there's a way to do a compromise where there's a nice, good starting box, and if somebody just wants to support the channel, collect some art, they buy that box and they're done. And if other people just want to collect random cards and see what they draw, I think there is some fun to that. So maybe being able to do both would be nice, and that's something maybe we can discuss at the end. But for now, why don't we jump into things and I can kind of show you the mechanics of how this game works. If there's enough interest, I could even do little development logs on a side channel or something. That could be fun. So the way I have this now is that you have a set German and Soviet faction. They have to play against each other. In the center of the board, we have terrain that's going to be laid. I know there's some other World War II card games that kind of take this idea of terrain cards, but from that point on, the whole game ends up being different. They are quite similar to like Magic the Gathering. I don't believe that this game is very similar to Magic the Gathering in almost any way, though I haven't really played Magic the Gathering. So I'm almost saying that because I haven't played it, I was not inspired by it in any way. So hopefully the similarities end, for better or for worse, once I show kind of the core mechanics and structure of the game. There are still things like resource cards, though. But yeah, we can select a battle. And by the way, in terms of monetization or packaging, you could even sell like battle-themed boxes. So if you buy a Kursk box, it could have a lot of tank cards, for example, or Stalingrad could have a lot of shock infantry. So maybe that's a way to get the variety instead of doing one giant $80 box, which I think would be overpriced and logistically difficult to do, but to still give people something unique and interesting to purchase or to collect. Either way, we can select a battle. Do you guys have a preference? I usually do like Smolensk here because it's mainly just fields. That at least is my preset for it. Something like Stalingrad is probably more exciting, but it's so many city terrain cards that the cities end up adding complexity to the rules. So maybe we'll just start with Smolensk here. And so you can kind of select the battle there and draw the terrain. So our battle includes a village, a field, another field, and what do we have? Another field. So it's a big open field. In fact, I may even redraw just for the sake of variety. Let's see if we grab something else. Oh, okay, we have a lot of fields in here. There we go. We got a river. Just for fun to show off the different terrain. So we have a lot of defense on the flanks, and then a big open field in the center. And so I made some pre-built decks here. And so let's just say we do standard and standard. And I'll like respond to comments as I'm explaining stuff too. Hopefully that's not too like interruptive. If it is annoying, just let me know. But I would like to be interactive with you guys. Hadado says the last game had different divisions, like Panzer Division or Infantry, so you could split into sections. Yeah, I was thinking you could have division decks, which is nice and alliterative, and then battle boxes or something like that. And a battle box could be larger, and a division deck could be pre-built decks centered around a theme. That could be kind of cool. I don't want to overpromise or come up with a billion ideas and try to sell a whole ton of boxes. I think at the very least, I would just sell one little box that just has a good variety of cards that you can play. And if it ends there and there's not too much interest, it could purely serve as a piece of merchandise. So for someone like Garrett who says, hey, I don't know if there's going to be too much demand since you already have a game like cards. Maybe that's true, but also if I just sell it, think of it this way as well. How many YouTubers sell a plushie? If I were to say, hey, I'm going to do a big crowdfunding thing for a plushie that's 20 or 30 bucks, you kind of say the same argument, like how much demand is there? You already have plushies for every YouTube channel. Does your audience really want a plushie of you or something? But YouTubers still do it, and it's fine. If people want it, they want it, and if they don't, they don't. So to me, I view this more as a more creative way than doing a plushie. It's something that can work as a game, but it's also a way to collect artwork that's unique to the channel. I think another difference with cards, number one, in terms of gameplay, it's vastly different. But in terms of the artwork, cards utilizes real, either colorized photographs or kind of painted style World War II images, whereas we're doing our art style, which I think is very different. So having a different art style, a different way the game is played, and connected to the channel, I think it at least sets it apart in that way. A Napoleonic game could be quite cool, but I don't know how big the audience would be for that. Now, I will say that once I explain the mechanics, and I'm already 10 minutes into the stream. I haven't even talked about the mechanics of the game, but I am just trying to answer questions, and I'll get to that in a moment. But mechanically, I think this could probably be ported to different time periods, but I think it's most fun in World War II because I have a unique hard and soft attack system, similar to Hearts of Iron. It honestly plays like a Hearts of Iron combat system. And again, that's different from Cards. Cards just has attack and defense value, like any other card game. We have a thing where, for example, a guards rifles could go up against, let me just select a few different tanks. In fact, I think this is a good example. This Panzer IV looks like it would beat the guards rifles, right? It has a 4 versus a 3. But what you have to look at on these two cards here are the primary value, which in this case, this is a hard unit at 4. This is a soft unit at 3. If you have an asymmetric combat, meaning the two primary values don't match, you need to then default to your secondary values. Before I even get to that, let me bring up an easier example. Let's say we had partisan or penal troops here versus, German SS grenadiers. They both use soft attack as their primary form of attack, a 4 versus a 2. This is very easy and straightforward. The infantry is going to clash, a 4 beats a 2, the 4 wins, and that's it. The combat is over. So that's nice and simple. Things get more complicated but more interesting, I find, when you have these asymmetric matches. If you had, a T-26 versus a Panzer IV, that 4 beats the 2 in the same way that this 4 beats this 2. So Panzer IV is going to crush the T-26. But let's say the Panzer IV doesn't have a great machine gun. It's mainly used, let's say it's the Panzer IV F2 model that's mainly used for killing tanks. And so its soft attack is only a 2. And let's say that these guards riflemen are equipped with bazookas and Molotov cocktails. And so when you go to these secondary values of combat, you're now looking at a 2 soft attack against a 4 hard attack. And suddenly these guards rifles overpower the Panzer IV, which is not great at killing infantry. I think you have more interesting examples as well when you bring out something like a half-track like this, which is technically a hard unit. The primary value is hard, but it's not very good at being a hard unit. It only has a 1, but its soft attack is extreme. And if you use a piece of equipment, an equipment card, for example, a flamethrower here, we could attach a flamethrower onto the SDKF and give it even higher soft attack. So now you've got to overcome a 6. And so if that guards rifles ran up to this and say, hey, you have crappy hard attack, I'm going to take you out just like the Panzer IV, the guards rifles go to charge, and immediately the flamethrower and the MG42 opens up. And because this is primarily a hard target, we default to the secondary value. So the 4 goes against a 4, which is tied, but you add in that flamethrower, it's now a 6 versus a 4, and those guards rifles can't overpower this anti-infantry armored target. Now, at the same time, you might think, oh, well, now it's getting overpowered. How are you supposed to kill this thing if it's got a flamethrower and a machine gun on it? I can't use the guards rifles to take it out. Well, here's where that kind of rock, paper, scissors kind of comes into play, although there's not 3 elements. I guess it would be rock and paper, or however you'd want to say it. But if you just brought up the lightest Soviet vehicle and said, hey, beep, beep, I've got a 2 against your 1, we're both hard targets, I'm just going to fire an AP shell straight into this vehicle, even though I've got all this soft attack, it just explodes instantly. So you have a nice balance, I find, between lower tier units. I think in some card games, you look at a penal unit and you're like, well, this thing's useless. Why would I ever use it? But if you find those weak targets, suddenly this penal unit that only costs 1, it's actually evenly matched with the Panzer IV. And so you give the penal troops, a PTRS, like so, and now I have 3 hard attack against 2 soft, and the penal troops can charge into the Panzer IV and take it out. Interestingly, though, the penal troops have a trait called Fragile, which means they defend at -1 strength. So if this Panzer IV can come out and attack the penal troops first and catch them off guard, that'd be an even fight. It'd be a 2 against 3 -1, which is 2. So it's an even fight, and that's where the tactical cards now come into play. This is how you play the game. You command troops using orders. And an order may include something like an assault, which allows you to attack at +1. So if that Panzer IV comes in on an assault at +1, ambushing these penal troops who are not prepared to defend themselves, they can take them out. And then you have terrain come into play, and that's going to add just a little bit of extra modifiers into things like villages or rivers, for example. And so that there is kind of a brief explanation of the way that combat works, and in ways that I find the game unique. That perhaps is maybe not as comparable to a Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, or Cards, for example. And I have nothing against the game Cards, by the way. I'm just trying to highlight a difference or something that I find unique about it. And I'm also explaining this because if this were Napoleonic, that hard and soft attack system, which I really like, would kind of get thrown away. I suppose you would have like attack and morale or something, and but then again, you don't attack somebody with morale, and I don't know how you'd have an asymmetric matchup. You could maybe have units with like firing and melee stat, and so if somebody has really high fire rate but a lower melee, maybe they could be overpowered by a charging unit, but then that would be more medieval at that point, right? So I think that as of now, with this current iteration, the nice balance between armored targets and soft targets is really fun to play with, in my opinion. Vielgard says do both, make a complete set box that people who just want to play once, and then make some shiny versions. Veal, that is exactly what I was thinking. If you don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on booster packs and gambling cards, you just buy a starter box and you're done. And you can play the game, you've got a good variety of cards, you're not going to play competitively, that doesn't matter, you're just going to play the game or collect it as a piece of merchandise. And then it's done. And then if people want to buy little boosters and collect fun rare cards, then they can. Am I going to finish the game? The last game was buggy on Steam. Yeah, so this would be more of a physical game and not a digital game. In terms of digital games, we're making a new game that, in my opinion, is better than Fire Maneuver. It has a better monetization model that's going to be friendlier for people who purchase it, but also a monetization model that can support development. I think one of the issues with Fire Maneuver is that we gave away, I think, 250,000 copies for free. And that sounds great because you can get a lot of people playing. But when we do that, we were unable to make enough money to even cover the costs of the project. And so this was just my fault for poor planning. And so we ended up having a lot of volume, a ton of people come in, but we had no money to continue the development. So I ended up pouring my own money in for a year after the game came out, just to try to get it as stable as possible. But because there was no revenue coming in, I was unable to really do anything, and I had no publisher. So that was just me being naive in terms of maybe being too excited and trying to give it out for free. And because we gave it out for free, we had to put a bunch of DLC in, and now it looks even worse, right? Like, how are these guys creating this unfinished game that has DLC in it? So then I just kind of dug myself into a hole. I think for future projects, just coming out with a fair and reasonable price, nothing too high, but nothing free, would allow people to buy into it, not feel like they have to spend more money on it, and for the development of that project, it allows it to have the necessary funding to continue. I think free-to-play games can be a really big gamble in that way, and that was a major mistake that I had made. So I apologize for anybody who was excited about the game and maybe were disappointed by the results of it. But that's a mistake that I don't want to repeat, and that I feel like I learned a lot from, both in terms of video games, in terms of this card game, I suppose, and really any other projects I work on. I think if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And making something free to play and really having no backup idea for how we're going to monetize it, it ended up just really backfiring on me. And in the pursuit of trying to do something cool and trying to give a lot away, I ended up really damaging the game as a result. But I've talked a lot about that. I have a video on my other channel, Armchair History Interactive, where I do talk about why that game failed and some mistakes that were made and how we're going to try to avoid that. Okay, can units get bogged down in urban warfare? Yeah, so we have urban cards, which I've thrown away here. I'll just load up the example again. You have urban cards like this, where we can draw cities, a river, and more cities. So let's say this is Stalingrad with like the Volga River, and then the steppes where the Russians encircled the Germans. So you could, this gives you a lot of soft defense for infantry, and then if you add sandbags onto units like so, you could end up really getting, +4 defense. That's crazy. So you could really bog down the cities, but then if you jump over to a steppe, which has got no defense, you can really overrun those areas. The way that that's balanced out is quite interesting, because let's say that the steppe and the city was next to each other. When units fight, they actually go up onto the terrain and secure it, and that's how you win. There's no headquarters in this game, which again, I think separates it from games like Cards or Magic the Gathering. There's no headquarters that you're trying to muster against and keep track of things. Likewise, there's no tokens. There's not a single token, tracker, board, anything. In fact, this could be deleted here, and the entire game is played just with cards. So that's something I do really like about it. You don't have to keep track of hit points or anything like that. But what's neat about this is if I was undefending, let's say I stuck everything in the city, and I was not defending the steppe, this assault squad can jump up into it, and when it does, it is now allowed to attack adjacently. And when it attacks adjacently, no terrain modifiers are applied. So this would allow me to outflank the city, perhaps encircling it if I manage to defeat this artillery piece, and I can launch assaults into the city and wipe out the units fairly easily. So while you can hunker down and really defend, there are ways when a breakthrough is made for a defense to collapse. And I think this makes the game dynamic when I've playtested it, where the game doesn't necessarily bog down too much into defensive structures. You'll even notice on this assault squad, they have a shock perk, ignores defensive terrain when attacking. So these are the type of guys, if you get bad terrain and let's say you kind of got screwed because there's cities everywhere, these are the guys you want to send in to overcome a sandbag spam with cities and try to knock the enemy units out. And that makes them quite valuable. I have all sorts of traits that can synergize well with different commands and different terrain and different units. For example, there's also a protect trait, and that is going to boost the defense of other units sharing the same zone. So if you want to play more defensive, there's a way to do that. But if you want to play more offensive, you could take an aggressive fanatic unit or a hunter or shock unit and try to send them in and dislodge an enemy efficiently. Yeah, Garrett, if you're interested in helping out or being part of our Discord, I'll also link a Discord here where people could join in and learn more about it. And chip in and perhaps playtest too. I'm willing to playtest if anybody has Tabletop Simulator. I've been playing with people in our community. Okay. Why not add chips for logistics? I think for now, Roman, I like how streamlined everything is. I set out to do no calculators, no dice, no chips, nothing. It's all purely with the cards. And I think it's quite fun as it is. I'll show maybe a playthrough with that as well if I'm done answering questions. Roman, thank you for the $2. Add a legendary card. Yeah, I think there would be sort of legendary cards with rare stuff, like a King Tiger or something like that. Or perhaps, if I don't want to make it feel as pay to win, you could just have rare cards be rare artwork. You could have like an alternative camouflage for a unit. And so, for example, this could be the most common German Grenadier, but this could be like the rare one. It's got the same stats, but just a unique uniform. So there's another way to monetize that, perhaps in a more fair way there. Hidden use copy button. Okay, yeah, whoops. Let me fix that issue there. There, that's the Discord if you're interested. People who want to play the game can buy a full deck. People who want to buy merch can buy a little bit. Yeah, that's also true, Veal, as well. If it was a trading card game, you could just buy a single booster just for the sole purpose of collecting some art, and that's it. Oh, David Thompson, that's awesome to have you. David, I knew you would come in. I was thinking of like, if I put a thumbnail that was like a Batman beacon for David Thompson, how I would do that. I had a message drafted to you, but I was afraid to send it because I'm like, I haven't spoken to him in a year. Let me refine the game a little bit and come back to him. That makes my day, David, to have you come in. I would love to show this to you again. I know you play tested our previous version. And honestly, after that playtest, I stopped developing the game because I was like, you know what? I playtested with David. I playtested with a few other people. It's not really as unique and engaging as I wanted. I'm going to put it on pause. And after pausing for a year, I really tore down the structure of the whole game and rethought of it from scratch. There's some shared mechanics with the previous version, which include the soft and hard attack system. But I really want to go back to the drawing board and come up with something more unique. Okay, that's really cool to see you pop by. And I'm also curious to ask you if you have any thoughts about games that are collectible trading card games and living card games, if you know anything about that, because I've been learning more about different ways that those card games are sold and manufactured, and I'm kind of curious if you've heard anything about that, because I've been researching a little bit and I'm hearing mixed opinions on either ends, but yeah, nice to have you come by. I also stole one mechanic from Undaunted. Everything else from Undaunted that I had in my previous version kind of ended up getting thrown out in favor of some more unique things as I was learning more about card games and trying to make this game stand on its own more. But I did steal one thing from Undaunted, which is the bidding system when a turn begins. So that's my one little influence I still have from Undaunted that I quite liked. Awesome, David, I appreciate it. Thank you for writing to me in that way. Like I said, I had a little message drafted, but I wanted to wait to send it. It's here. I can show you my. Here I said, "Hi David, it's been a while," and I was going to send that message. I'm like, I'm just gonna leave that drafted for a little bit and come back to him when I have something a bit more polished to show off. But yeah, okay. Just to give you guys like a little demo, I will play through a game and show you kind of the pacing of how this game works. And somebody here also asked about how to win the game. And I will show you guys how that works. So if I reload fronts up here, we can select Smolensk. And I like the terrain that we had before. Let's see what we get this time, though. We've got a field, a village, a river, another field, and another field. Thank you, Mr. Battlefield Gods, for the $10. Please do cosmetic and art add-ons. Additional booster boxes with new cards could be sets that have list cards they contain. No gambling. That's interesting. That's cool. Yeah, I would really like to find a way. The one thing I'll say, and I don't want to keep digressing, I would like to show you guys how the game is played, but I would like to keep answering questions, but yeah, when I went to a card game store recently and I just bought a bunch of starter packs and boosters and pre-built decks and all sorts of things, I think the least interesting thing for me I had found was when I bought a pre-built deck and it had 200 cards in it, or something high. Maybe it was just 100. I'm exaggerating, but it just had a lot of cards in it. And I was looking through and everything was already guaranteed, and I was like, all right, that's cool. But then I opened a little booster of 15 cards, and I'm like, okay, it's fun to go through these. And then I had my other booster, and then I kind of mix the cards and see which ones I like. And there was something that was appealing to having a nice small amount of manageable cards with a little bit of randomness for excitement. But I also completely am on the side of having a very formal, dedicated box that you know exactly what you're going to get. You have everything you need to play. It's not withholding good cards that prohibit you from playing competently, and just having something nice and sturdy as like the base set for the game. I know there's some other card games that'll be like, hey, this is the base box, but you actually have to buy 4 copies of these base boxes. Or this is the base box, it just contains a bunch of crappy cards. If you really want to play well, you've got to gamble on boosters. So for me, I like the excitement of finding cool cards and finding the cool art, as you had mentioned. And I don't want everything to be 100% guaranteed, but I'm definitely also on the side of like, if there is a booster box or some standard kind of boosters, they should have something that's more like predictable, or something that doesn't make you feel like you've got to buy 100 of them to get a single good card. I don't want a player to ever feel like they're gambling with it. That's not a good feeling to have. I think it should be kind of on the line between being exciting and having some things that feel a little unpredictable, but also that you've always got your standard cards that you can play around and you're not missing something crucial to play the game. To me, that would be important. Okay. So I will show you... Matic is saying, will it look like this in the final product? Will it change? This is all just a prototype, so everything artistically is completely prototyped, even including the formatting of the cards. This is an example here. I like this art style for my cards, so I would go for more of something like this rather than the current card styles that I just use as placeholders. But yeah, okay, I'm going to pause questions just for the time being, and I'm going to jump in and just show you. So both players are going to pick a deck. I've got some pre-built ones. Let's say the Soviets build their deck, the Germans build theirs. They can also choose an order deck that you can deck build for. And so I'm just going to go with a standard one that I've already pre-built. Actually, I should undo that because I need to copy and paste it. One for each player. There we go. All right, so I'll just do a little setup here. And then we'll clear out the table so it doesn't look too cluttered, okay? So we're going to clear all that. Okay, so yeah, players will deck build both a unit deck and a command deck to issue orders. The first step for both players is to draw 7 cards. I'm thinking maybe doing 8 cards, but for now it's 7. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll make sure I shuffle everything. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so both players are going to see what they've got, and these are all their commands that they're going to have. Now, at the start of the game, you have no units to command. So your 2 options when you play are either to operate, which is to play these cards onto the battlefield, or to mobilize, which is to build up your army and get them deployed. Now, because we have no units, our only option is to mobilize. But to determine who goes first, this is where we stole a little mechanic from Undaunted, where we're just going to bid using the supply cost values of our command cards. And so if I really want that initial turn, you can bid a lot. Or you can also just burn a card that you know you're not going to use. If I find that a withdrawal card is a card that I'm not really interested in using, and it's worth 6 supply points, then I may just bid that for the opening turn. And my opponent, let's say, bids... they don't care about having the first turn. They want to save all their supply cards. They may just bid a rush. And so when we reveal, we've got a 6 and a 2. Okay, that means the German player has the initiative. We're going to discard those cards. And now the hand that we're going to be playing with is 6 cards per person. Now, what's interesting about this is neither player is going to redraw cards and refill their hand until both players have fully exhausted their hands. And you are not going to play every card in your hand. You're going to play a few at a time, back and forth. And so over time, your command hand is going to get smaller and smaller until you've ran out. you may have a really big turn where you want to play out 4 cards, or you may want to wait and see what your opponent is doing and play 1 card at a time, and maybe have them waste more of their cards so you can counterattack. So the pace at which you're playing your cards will also matter. One thing I would also like to do is, let me just see if I can draw. I'm going to draw this and just replace a card, just to have variety, because this is a purple card, and I want to show you how the purple cards work. Those are reactions. So because the German player is going first, they're going to choose to mobilize, and the first thing they decide is how many cards they're going to spend on supply. So let's say they want to get about 12 points. They need to take an off-track tactique and a flank. That's 12 points that they can spend. And so we're going to draw 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we have 12 points to spend on whatever combination we want. So we can actually go 4, 8, 12 and get an AT gun, a howitzer, and a mechanized. I don't quite need so many pieces of heavy equipment yet, though. So I may not do that. I may go with a grenadier, a half-track with a flamethrower. That's a good combination that I quite like. So that's up to 9. And so we have 3 points left. We can't really spend it on anything else. So if we can't spend it on anything else, these go into the destroyed pile. Now, don't worry. Anything that is destroyed will eventually come back when I'm out of drawing cards. But it does mean if you don't buy them now, you're going to have to wait a long time before you get them. So how many cards that you put out to spend kind of matters. If you spend so little, if I only had spent 2 points and drew 5 cards and I couldn't afford anything, they'd all go into the destroyed pile. So you kind of want to make sure you don't spend too much or too little. And so now these cards go away. And so that my opponent is not waiting too long. Once I deploy these, that's it. My turn is done. I don't even draw new cards. I have these 4. My turn's done. Simple as that. The other player is going to do the exact same thing. So they're going to choose to mobilize. And they may say, all right, I want to spend, let's say, 10 points. So they're going to draw 5. And they've got a lot of cheap cards. And so they may go, let's put out some penal units. On the river, they've got good defense. The grenadiers won't overtake them. We've got a threat of a mechanized vehicle. So I need some hard attack to pierce that. And I may want to bring in some guards rifles. So now I'm up to 5. So I have 5 points left to spend. And that may actually be perfect to get an assault squad and some riflemen. It means we don't get the commissar. He's going to get thrown away. And so now we have these 2 cards. And I'm going to put them in the field to just apply some pressure on the right flank. And those cards are done. Now is where things get interesting. I have 4 cards left. I can continue to mobilize and draw more, or I can now operate. And I may choose to now operate and see if there's a target that I can take on. Now, I do have a card here called Assault, and that lets me attack at a +1. I also notice there's an assault squad over here. I can't kill these guys. If maybe I move my armored vehicle across, I'd have 6 heart attack against his 2. I could annihilate those penal troops, even though they're defending at +2. So what I may want to do is push, which allows me to move, and I will move this STKF into the river area. Now, the maximum amount of cards that are allowed on a piece of terrain is 2. So I've filled up this front now. And I'm doing this, I'm kind of leaving my flanks vulnerable, but I really want to just try to get a kill. And so I move this over. That push is now used. And so I could do a fire and maneuver. And so I could now attack this penal troop, who defends at -1 strength, so he's really defending. He's going to use his hard attack value because he's trying to pierce armor, right? So he's going to defend with a 1, and I'm bringing a 6 because I'm using my soft. Now he's on the river, so he's defending at 2, so he's at 3, but I still beat that by 3 points. Now my opponent could try to play a reaction card, but they don't have any. Reaction cards are purple. And just to pause here, the reaction cards let you stop an attack. Maybe you play... and they have a lightning bolt. Maybe you play an entrench to bolster your defense by 2, or withdraw to run away, or intercept, which allows your unit to be destroyed, but you immediately get to counterattack with something else. So players can kind of be tactical with the movement cards, the attack cards, and reactions that they get, and so it allows you to interrupt a player's attack. Also, what's interesting about it is if I overattack, I'm bringing a 6 to a 3. It might seem like overkill, but this helps ensure that even if my opponent played an entrench card as a reaction, they'd only go up to 5. So by overstacking this damage, I really ensure that I can try to get the kill. If I'm only 1 point ahead, chances are they're going to play a defense and my attack will get thrown out. But in this case, I overcome the penal unit and he is destroyed. Now, because everything's on 1 bullet point, attack and move 1, I get to do both actions. If they were separated on 2 different bullet points, I'd get to choose which action, attack or move. But what's nice about this special fire and maneuver card, I get to attack and move. So I'm going to use that to attack and then push up into the river because no one's defending it. So I'm actually allowed to go and seize that terrain. And I've got 2 cards left, but I'm going to stop there. I'm going to keep those 2 cards. I don't want to exhaust my hand because then my opponent knows I have no response. So tactically, I'm going to keep 2 cards back and not play everything. And now I'm going to let my opponent go. And notice I wasn't able to mobilize again. You have to choose whether you want to attack or to mobilize. But in this case, I was able to move the SDKF, move it across the river, take out that unit before it got built up, because that river is a very strong point, and take it over. Now, the drawback to taking this river is I covered up the card. It has no defense now. The idea being that my unit has advanced past the river, and in doing so, kind of stuck its neck out. Now, I can attack ahead of myself and on my adjacent areas, and bypass any terrain modifiers, but my opponent can also do the same. So because I stuck my neck out here, trying to take this point and win the game, my opponents can attack adjacently and counterattack me when it's their turn. Now, speaking of winning the game, how you win is you collect 3 terrain cards. The way you do that is when both players run out of their hand. So you've played every single card. So I play these 2 back and forth. They play all of them, and we're both out of cards. When we go to draw back up to 7 to start a new round of combat, any unit that is remaining on a piece of terrain gets to keep that terrain. So I get to actually take this river as a victory point. I fall back, and a new piece of terrain is now placed. So now there's another river, but let's say it's now a field. The explanation being that the SDKF took the river, pushed the line forward, and now has approached a field. So in that way, you can kind of notice the battlefield evolving over time. And it's multi-purpose. I get to use the terrain cards as victory points. If I get 3 victory points, I win. So the game encourages you to kind of take a risk and push and capture terrain, but also the battlefield will constantly evolve in the process. I'll backtrack a little bit because I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So we'll kind of revert that. What's kind of cool about this too is... what's it called? If there was like a D-Day scenario, you could have like all the beaches of Normandy, and then when a unit has secured a beach as a victory point, it could then turn into like bocage or a field as if the troops are advancing off of the beaches. So it's kind of neat in that way that the battlefield will evolve. Anyways, I'm on top of the river. I'm threatening my enemy with a flamethrower SDKF. Now it's their turn. Luckily for them, these guards rifles are great at piercing armor, but that's 6 soft attack is something they have to overcome. So they would have to beat 6 soft used against infantry. They have 4 hard attack, so that's still not going to beat it for them. If they had a +2 assault, maybe they could, but I don't think they have one. Something that they could do, however, is they could try to save up for a mass assault. So what they could do is use an assault card to move, like so. Use an aggressive maneuver to move again, to now stack this front at a maximum of 2. This front is now full. So that opens up a new option for them. They can play a mass assault here. This says attack, increase the strength by 2 if your front is full. So this is now a full front. So we're able to now collectively utilize our strength to do a mass assault. So even if I use this, I would get, what, a 6? And my opponent would have it. We would be defending with a 6. So we'd actually be at equal strength. In this case, I could not win the assault. So this SDKF would really be causing a problem for me. So if I undid that, and instead chose to do a different course of action, maybe I'd want to mobilize and try to get something anti-tank out. That's perfect. With these 12 points, I'm kind of on the back foot, but I'm going to use that to go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 maybe, and 12. So that's 12 points I've now mobilized. And I'm bringing out armor, because I know this thing's going to murder all my infantry with heavy soft attack. But look at all these tanks, 2, 3, and even this anti-tank weapon. All of these things are capable of killing that mechanized vehicle. So I've played a really good counter to my enemy. I'm still on the back foot because they've got this terrain, and I'm going to run out of cards soon. But at least I'll be able to bolster the front, even if they launch their own big assault. So I may play a T-34 directly to this river. I may put an anti-tank gun ready to shore up that defense if something happens. and simultaneously threaten this field that my opponent has not covered with a T-26. I also have sandbags, and I may try to protect these guards riflemen because I know they're about to get outflanked by the mechanized. And now I've only got 2 cards left. The turn flips. So we can see there that the Germans felt like they had a really big advantage, but the Soviets could actually come back from that. You can still recover. So there's some anti-snowballing in that way by seeing what your opponent has, drawing, and immediately getting to deploy stuff to try to counter it. And so that back and forth kind of continues. I took a risk thinking maybe they're not going to have the type of cards to counter me, and so I could try to push up onto this river. But now it's quite risky for me because 3 different things could possibly take me out, or mainly this T-34, which has a good hard attack. For me, I may, at this point, I know I'm going to lose that mechanized vehicle. I may just try to mobilize. I don't know if there's any good easy kills for me to get. I kind of doubled down too much on trying to take that river. And so I may need to use these cards to try to get more on the front line. Okay, lucky for me, I pulled a Tiger. So I have 10 points. I'm going to get a 7. We'll go 8, 9, 10. So we'll get a Grenadier out to kind of match enemy riflemen. We'll get the Tiger out to match or actually overcome that T-26 eventually. And we'll get sandbags and we'll actually put this on the Grenadiers there. So I'm now out of cards. My opponent has 2 cards left. They're going to choose to play and see what they can take out. They can attack at +1. So let's see what they could do with an attack at +1. T-34, they may not even need to use that, but let's just use it anyways. They'll attack the T-34 against the mechanized vehicle. So they're attacking out of 4 because they're using a hard... We're both hard targets, right? We're both armored. So I'm using a 4. They have a 1. So I annihilate this thing. It's destroyed. And then I could do like a move and attack. So let's see if there's anywhere good for me to move. I'm not quite sure. I think I'll just move something up, but I don't have a good attack I want to play. Actually, you know what I could do? I could move up and then use the assault squad to attack adjacently, right? Because it can attack in 3 ways. And attack. And that 3 beats a 2. So I can actually knock out the Grenadiers there. So you kind of have this back and forth here. With the Germans, I've got a Tiger, so I feel like at least I can take out the T-26 and deal with the armor. For the Soviets, I've got good momentum with the infantry. But at times, it looked like the Germans were definitely going to win, right? They had the flamethrower on the river. And then at other times, it looks like the Soviets are going to win because they have tanks. But now the Germans have a Tiger, and then you're going to go back and forth and back and forth. Okay, so that is roughly how the game works here. But like I said, if you didn't even want to view this as a game, it could just be for fun to collect card artwork, right? So all of this artwork is just placeholder. It's going to be replaced with stuff like this. And if you just want to buy it for the art, then that's also totally fine. So something I like about this is its versatility. Instead of selling a plushie, which you can only use as decoration, you could sell a deck of cards which can be used as decoration or just fun to collect as artwork, but it could also be played as a game. So I think it has kind of a nice use in those 2 different ways. Okay, that's kind of a good overview of the game. It will be sold as it would be sold as a physical game, not a digital game, and primarily as merchandise. So if you're interested, I'll leave a Discord link, and you can hop in if you're interested, and I'll answer questions. But yeah, what do you guys think? It seems a little confusing as I'm going back and forth. I think it's always going to seem confusing or maybe a little complex because I'm trying to play 2 different sides at once. But if you're just hanging out on one side and you're just like looking at your vehicles, seeing what command cards you have, and you're not constantly disorienting yourself like I was when I was flipping the camera back and forth, I think it's a little easier once you get into the flow. But I've play tested a few times, and I've had very close matches, which is quite fun. In this case, by the way, since both players have run out of cards, these shock troops, this assault squad, would kind of go back, collect the field as a victory point, and draw a new piece of terrain. And now the next phase begins. And the game continues until one side has collected 3 pieces of terrain. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. And you've got all sorts of interesting cards here. We've even got like smoke screens that you can play on terrain. You've got deep battle doctrine for the Soviets, or a mass charge where you destroy your unit but you attack really high. You've got Fanatic Resistance, which allows you to defend at +1 and then immediately counterattack them back. So there's some interesting cards here as commands that you play to your troops. And I think there's ways to synergize them too. If you were to create your own command deck, or your order deck, as well as your own unit deck, you could have a lot of tanks and a lot of blitz-oriented cards, which boosts armor. So I think it's kind of thematic in that way, that the units would be utilizing tactics that they would have historically. Or barrage cards given to a deck focused more on things like artillery. And of course, as I mentioned too, the mass charges used with something like partisans, who on their own are not very strong. But if you had these, and you had penal troops here, right? These are very cheap. It only costs 2 points to deploy them. If the front is full, which it is, you attack at +3. So I'm attacking at 5. They're defending at 4. I'd be able to overwhelm the grenadiers and take them out, meaning I killed 3 points worth of men. And I would destroy myself in the process, but my unit is only worth 1. So you can kind of use these different orders and mass charge the penal troops in. And there's different ways to kind of like synergize or combine different units with different traits and abilities and that sort of thing. Okay. Yeah, Big Swag, it's a physical game. Up front too, make sure there's terrain decks. Ruined by cities and mountains. I've heard of Upfront. It looks a little more complex than what I'm doing, but it looks fun. I've never played it. In fact, I've really not played many card games generally. Okay. Do you have ideas for naval or sea land hybrid battles? Gearkid, I don't have anything for like naval stuff, but you could definitely do aircraft through these commands. Imagine you had a command called Strafing Run, and maybe it does a -1, like, or just like a very low attack across the whole front. Bang, 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 bang. But maybe it's only doing 2 soft attack. So if the enemy put a lot of crap up and they didn't entrench them or put them in sandbags and they're in open fields, that Strafing Run might be able to knock out like 2 or 3 units. Or you might strafe and you don't kill anything because they're all dug in. So there could be cool like air power cards. You could even have a reaction. So imagine this. Imagine I had a... I'll just clean everything up real quick. There, so it's nice and clean. Imagine I had an air power card that let me bomb an enemy unit. And then let's say I had a fighter reaction card. And the fighter reaction gives a +1 defense. But it gives a +2 defense if used against air. So I could normally use, if there's just a regular attack coming in, I'd use my air power fighters to kind of just give them +1 defense. But if the enemy's using a bomber plane, I get to come in with +2 defense as a reaction and shoot down the bomber, destroying the card, and like that. And it uses all the same mechanics. It uses the reaction command system, but thematically it'd be like a little dogfight that's happening, or a bomber plane getting shot down, unable to carry out its mission. So I do think there's opportunity for that, for sure. What happens if both players win? I've had a situation where it goes into overtime where we both get 3 terrain cards, and you just keep going until somebody gets an advantage in terrain. And that's quite fun, because it's it's like sudden death. It's very close at that point. Where the cards would be sold. So I think I would just do it on my website, and I would honestly sell it. I think the best way to envision this is not this big, overambitious trading card game, super high cost, very complicated, 100 different sets you need to collect. In my opinion, the very first iteration of this game would be very much seen as like a piece of merchandise, as an extension of my store, where you could go to any YouTuber store to buy a mug or a t-shirt. I could just sell a deck of cards that could be simultaneously used to collect as artwork or as a game. And then if it does well, I could add more onto it, or add more countries or more decks or whatever, if people wanted that. Or if people just wanted to buy a set and that was it, and they don't want to spend a lot of money on it, it could just be one limited run. I sell it, people have fun, and we move on. I think that's total. I'm not going to force it to try to be something bigger than it is. So I think at the very least, it would just be on my store and just sold as a nice little piece of merchandise. So even if you don't enjoy the game for what it is, it could just be fun to have the cards, right? Is there potential for 2 more players? Gray, I think there's nothing stopping you from doing this. You know, why couldn't you have a huge wide front and have multiple players? You could even divide it and say that they couldn't help each other maybe on the battlefield. Maybe they can only send each other units or send each other commands in the back, but they're both fighting over their own terrain or something like that. Or you could connect them. I'm not sure how that would work at the moment. But I bet you could. That everything can extend, right? The amount of victory points to win, the amount of terrain you're fielding, and that sort of thing could extend easily. Will the card get DLC or at least update? Yeah, so Matic, like I was just saying, I know you wrote the comment before I said this, but like I was saying, I don't want to pre-plan DLC and a bunch of monetization for something that's not even done yet. So at the very least, I just like to start small and engage what people's interest is, and then kind of go from there. I don't want to overpromise or try to sell you guys a bunch of things or lock a bunch of stuff behind payments and make you invest into a bunch of different boosters and everything. I just want to keep it nice and simple and fun and not overcommit to anything, and then let it expand organically. So if people like it and they want more, I can add more, but I'm not going to force anything into it. Could you make an operational tabletop version? Technically, there is a tabletop version here that works with a tutorial. So if you wanted the workshop item, I did put it on Steam Workshop, and I'll include a link to that. Here we are. So that is the tabletop download if you want to just mess around. Yeah, you should launch a meme coin. Yeah, no, that would be a bad idea. I like the tactics and how you explained it. I managed to understand it, but is there any rarity to the cards? I think, General Hecker, that there should be some rarity. I think it would be fun if something like a King Tiger is obviously rarer than a basic Grenadier. So I think in that regard, there could be rarity. I don't want to overdo it, though, to make it so somebody would need to, like, purchase 100 booster packs or something to get a standard competitive card just to be able to play a normal game. Like, I'm not interested in overdoing it in that way. I also think rarity could be done, though, through artwork. You could just have duplicates of cards with alternative, unique artwork or camouflage patterns, and those could be kind of rare as well. Okay, that's kind of it for me. You get a commanders that give boost to some troops. Tommy, I was thinking that as well. I was thinking you could have a tactic that says for every duplicate card that you have, increase the strength by 1 when attacking with one of them. And so that could be powerful if you manage to get like 3 T-34s out, but that's expensive to be able to pay for 3 T-34s. What wouldn't be expensive, though, is getting 3 or 4 penal troops deployed, like really cheap, weak troops, and then using a specific order card that buffs a critical mass of those. And because they're cheap to deploy, you get a lot of value out of doing that. So that could be quite interesting. Because that card wouldn't require you to necessarily field a swarm army of penal troops, but it could reward players for finding strategies within lower value cards. Because I also don't want it to be the case that cheaper troops are just ineffective and don't work. It would be fun if there are certain orders or tactics that can help buff troops in their own niche. Like a Pack 36 doesn't sound that interesting when you have Pack 38s, Pack 40s, and Flak 88s. But if those Pack 36s had something unique about them with an order as being like an agile AT gun or something like that, then maybe they're more interesting to bring in. Do you have a price in mind? I don't know yet. I really don't know. I have to do more research. I'm having active conversations with manufacturers, and I need to see first how expensive it is to make. So that will determine, I think, a lot about the price, because I need to make sure, if I said I want it to be $20 and it costs $30 to produce, I don't think it would cost that much, but I'm just saying, for example, I need to kind of figure that out and do a little more research first. Is there a commander stat, like a T-34, the better commander beats a Tiger? Yes and no. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, Potato, in terms of like how a commander would work, but we do have a system through the equipment that allows you to equip a commander in this way. So, for example, you could get a Panzer III and equip a Panzerführer, so a tank leader, onto the tank, which gives him the shock ability, which lets him overcome terrain, ignoring terrain totally. So if you had a city that gave you +2 defense, the shock Panzer III would overcome that defense and try to beat that card. So you can assign a commander to a tank to improve it, but you could also assign like side skirts to a tank to increase its defense, or you could assign an APCR round to a Panzer III, which could be a one-use piece of equipment. There's some equipment like a Panzerfaust that gives you a lot of hard attack, but you can only use it once and it gets destroyed. So you'd throw away the equipment after using it, which is kind of neat because you can kind of picture a soldier using a Panzerfaust and throwing it away. You'd use a Panzerfaust and then throw it into the destroyed pile, which is kind of fun because like you're actually like throwing away the Panzerfaust after it's used. So that could be fun for like limited ammunition rounds, like a Willy Pete, White Phosphorus rounds, or APCR, or things like that. I think that would be cool. I have all of that planned on a Google Sheet already. It's just not in this game. Right now, these are just a lot of placeholder cards with placeholder names, placeholder stats, and solely for prototyping and testing. Do you know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh? I honestly, Garrett, I have never played a proper trading card game ever. So I really don't know much about Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or things like that. I know the very basics of them, but I've never sat down and played a full game, which I think is a strength and a weakness. The weakness being that it's good to, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. It's good to know what the foundations are of a good card game. So that is a weakness in that way for me to have not played those games. I think the only strength is that I'm not going to subconsciously copy mechanics. So at least there are parts of the game that I think will probably be original. Like the soft and hard attack system, I haven't seen another game do. So, yeah. What other countries do you have planned? So, as I was saying, Andy, as well, I don't want to overpromise and come up with all these DLC and all these countries and sell all of these products. Unless I just started small. So I'm just going to start with Germany and the Soviets and just start nice and small with that. But if the game does well and people want it, I could easily add Japan, America, Britain, Italy, stuff like that. When is the game going to be public? So I think I would probably do, what do you guys think would work best? Should I do like a small Kickstarter for it? Or should I do, I'm not sure. Like, I could try to make a very small version of the card game with a pre-order or an order requirement system. So it would have to hit 250 orders in order to actually, at minimum, in order to actually send them out. And if we don't hit that 250 orders, everybody just gets refunded. Kind of like how Makeshift does plushies. Or I could do like a Kickstarter where the bare minimum is doing that, and then I could have some stretch goals. And if the goals do well, I can add more onto it for people based on their level of excitement for a project like that. But I don't want to create a Kickstarter for something that people aren't excited about. So depending on your guys' interest in this, I don't know, does this seem too interesting? Because I myself am not a big card game guy, but I do think there is something fun about the dual purpose of using it as like merchandise, just as a fun collectible for armchair historian artwork in a World War II setting, but also simultaneously have it as a game. And I think that's kind of a fun dual purpose for it. So I don't know if you guys would be interested in me pursuing a project like this. If there's just not enough interest in it, then maybe working on something else would be better. So I'm not sure. I'm curious to see what you guys think. We are going up on 57 minutes. I'll set a 5-minute timer. So I'll do 5 more minutes of the stream and answer any remaining questions. And then I'll leave the stream public if you guys want to think on things and ask questions, or download the mod and learn about it and ask questions there. And generally just give me your feedback, what you don't like about it and what you do in the comments. And then I can kind of read through it and kind of gauge what you guys are thinking.